The family abandoned Grandpa's house, but the grandson returned and discovered something unbelievable. Connor Mitchell stepped on the car's brake and felt his stomach tighten when he saw the house. 15 years had passed since the last time he was there, and time had not been kind to Grandpa Walter's property. It was his sister Ashley who called last week saying they needed to resolve the house situation. The overdue taxes were piling up, and the Greenfield City Hall had sent a final notice. Someone from the family needed to go there, clean everything up and put it up for sale. Since Connor was the only one who still lived in the area, he ended up being the one chosen for this task that nobody wanted to face. What a mess, he murmured to himself, turning off the engine. The wooden house that was once his grandfather's pride now looked like an abandoned skeleton in the middle of the pasture. The roof was full of holes, some wall planks had fallen, and the tall grass had taken over what was once a well-kept garden. Connor remembered how Grandpa Walter would spend hours watering the plants and pruning the fruit trees that surrounded the property. But that was before the fight, before that terrible December afternoon when the whole family gathered to discuss Grandma Dorothy's inheritance, who had passed away a few months earlier. What should have been a simple conversation about how to divide her few belongings turned into the biggest argument the Mitchell family had ever witnessed. Connor was only 15 at the time, but he could still hear the shouts echoing in his memory. His father, Raymond, had suggested it was better to sell the house and split the money among the children. Raymond's sister, Aunt Barbara, agreed immediately, saying Grandpa was getting too old to take care of such a large property alone. But Grandpa Walter exploded. "You're all a bunch of greedy people," the old man shouted that afternoon, slamming his fist on the kitchen table. "Your mother isn't even cold yet, and you already want to sell the house where she lived her whole life." "Dad, you need to be rational," Raymond tried to argue. "This house is too big. You can't take care of everything alone anymore." "Yes, I can, and if you don't like it, you can take your kids and get out of here. I don't want to see any of your faces on this property ever again." And that's exactly what happened. The whole family left the house that afternoon, with Grandpa Walter shouting that they were all ungrateful people who only cared about money. Connor tried to go back a few times after that, but Grandpa refused his visits, saying he was just like the rest of the family. Now, at 30 years old, Connor was finally back. But it was too late. Grandpa had passed away alone 3 months ago, found by the neighbor, Mrs. Ethel, who was surprised not to have seen him for several days. According to her, Walter had spent the last years of his life completely alone, without receiving visits from the family. Connor grabbed the keys he had picked up at the notary's office and walked toward the front door. The wood was warped from moisture and he had to force it a bit to get it open. The sound of the rusty hinges echoed through the empty house, making him shiver. The smell of mold hit his nostrils as soon as he entered. The living room was almost empty, with only a few old chairs and a dusty coffee table. Connor remembered the time when that space was always full of life, with the family gathering on Sundays to have lunch together. Grandma Dorothy insisted that everyone be present, from the children to the youngest grandchildren. "How things change," he sighed, running his finger over the dusty furniture. He decided to start exploring the kitchen, which was at the back of the house. There he found some old pots and a few dishes that Grandpa had used in his final years. Everything was very simple, very different from the bustling kitchen he remembered from childhood, always full of delicious food prepared by his grandmother. It was when he opened the first drawer of the old dresser that he saw something interesting. Among some old utensils and worn-out dish towels, there was a small key, different from the others he had received at the notary's office. The key was attached to a leather keychain with a handwritten address: Maple Street, 127, Unit 15. Connor had never heard of that address. He put the key in his pocket and continued searching the house. In his grandfather's room, he found only an old bed, a wardrobe with some simple clothes, and a dresser with practically empty drawers. It was striking how stripped the house seemed, almost as if Grandpa had gotten rid of nearly all his belongings. But it was in the attic that Connor made his first truly intriguing discovery. Climbing up the wooden stairs that creaked with every step, he found a cardboard box hidden behind some loose boards. Inside the box was a stack of bank receipts, all for transfers made in Grandpa Walter's name. Connor sat on the dusty attic floor and began to examine the documents more closely. The receipts showed monthly transfers to different bank accounts, always for the amount of 500 reais. What intrigued him most was that the names on the accounts were family members: his father Raymond, his aunt Barbara, his sister Ashley, and even himself. "What's this all about?" he murmured, checking the dates. The transfers had started right after the family fight 15 years ago and continued until just a few months before Grandpa's passing. Connor did the math quickly in his head. Over those years, Grandpa had transferred thousands of reais to each family member without anyone knowing. But that didn't make sense. His family had always faced financial difficulties after the falling out with Grandpa. His father worked as a mechanic and his mother, Beverly, did sewing at home to supplement their income. They had never received mysterious money from anywhere, at least not that Connor knew of. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Leaving the attic with the box of receipts under his arm, Connor decided he needed to talk to his parents about those documents. Maybe they could explain where this money that theoretically Grandpa was sending to the family was coming from. His parents' house was in the center of Greenfield, on a quiet street where he had grown up. When he arrived, it was already late afternoon, and he found the two of them watching television in the living room. "Connor, how was it at your grandfather's house?" asked Mrs. Beverly, getting up to hug her son. "It was complicated, Mum. I need to talk to you guys about something I found there." Raymond turned off the television and turned to his son with interest. Connor placed the box of receipts on the coffee table and began showing the documents to his parents. "Look at this. I found these receipts in the attic of the house. According to these papers, Grandpa Walter was transferring money to our family for 15 years, 500 reais a month for each of us." Beverly picked up one of the receipts and adjusted her glasses to read better. "This can't be right, son. We never received any money from your grandfather. You know how things got difficult after the fight." "It's true," agreed Raymond, furrowing his brow as he examined the documents. "These receipts must be fake, or there's some mistake. We never received a single cent from your grandfather after we fought." Connor grew even more confused by his parents' reaction. The receipts seemed authentic, with bank stamps and everything. It didn't make sense for someone to forge something like that. "Dad, are you sure you never received any money?" "Not even indirectly, maybe through some third party?" "I'm absolutely certain," replied Raymond, already showing irritation, "and I don't want to hear any more about it. Your grandfather threw us out of the house, remember? He made it very clear he wanted nothing more to do with us." "But Raymond—" Lourdes tried to intervene but was interrupted by her husband. "No, Beverly, we're not going to get our hopes up based on papers that might not even be real. Connor should just finish cleaning that house and put it up for sale. The longer it takes, the more money we'll lose on taxes." The conversation ended abruptly, leaving Connor even more intrigued. There was something strange about his parents' reaction, especially his father's. Why had Raymond been so bothered by the discovery? And why did his mother seem to want to say something but was prevented? The next day, Connor decided to go after the address that was on the key found in the drawer. Maple Street was in a commercial area of Greenfield, in a neighborhood he didn't know very well. Number 127 was a small storage unit complex, one of those places where people rent space to store things that don't fit in their homes. The manager of the place, a middle-aged man named Mr. Howard, confirmed that unit number 15 was registered in the name of Walter Mitchell and that the monthly fee was paid through the end of the year. "Your grandfather was a very punctual man with payments," commented Mr. Howard as he accompanied him to the unit. "He never missed a payment in all these years. How many years had he rented this space?" "Let me check my records here. Wow, 15 years. He rented it right after he moved here in 2009. Connor felt his heart race. 15 years ago, exactly when the family fight happened, his grandfather had rented that storage unit right after throwing the whole family out of the house. What a strange coincidence. Mr. Howard opened the padlock on the unit, and Connor was stunned by what he saw inside. There were several shelves organized with hundreds of letters carefully arranged in shoeboxes. Each box had a label with a family member's name: Raymond, Barbara, Beverly, Ashley, Connor, Jennifer, his younger cousin. With trembling hands, Connor opened the first box, the one with his name. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters in Grandpa Walter's distinctive handwriting. All were in envelopes addressed to him, but they had never been sent. The first letter was dated January 2009, just 1 month after the fight. "My dear grandson Connor, I know you must be confused and hurt by what happened here at home. I am too. Sometimes an old man like me makes mistakes that hurt the people he loves most. I wish I could explain everything to you, but it's too complicated for a 15-year-old boy to understand. I just want you to know that I never stopped loving you and our whole family. Everything I did was to protect you, even if you can't understand it now. I hope one day you can forgive me. With all my love, Grandpa Walter." Connor felt his eyes fill with tears as he read the letter. He picked up another from a more recent date and kept reading. "My dear grandson, today you turn 18. I wish so much I could be there celebrating with you, but I know I can't. I heard from Mrs. Ethel, who heard from your mother's neighbor, that you're taking the college entrance exam for engineering. I'm so proud of you. I know things haven't been easy financially for your family since you left here. I'm trying to help as I can, without you knowing. It's the only way I've found to look after you, even from a distance. I hope you have a happy and prosperous life, my boy. You were always my favorite grandson, though I should never admit that. Miss you, Grandpa Walter." Connor had to stop reading. The tears wouldn't stop falling, and he felt a tightness in his chest that almost prevented him from breathing. His grandfather had never stopped thinking about the family. He had never stopped loving them, and by the looks of it, he really had been helping financially, even if secretly. He picked up one of the most recent letters from just a few months before his grandfather's passing. "Connor, I am writing this letter even knowing you may never read it. I am getting old and sick, and I feel my time is coming to an end. There are so many things I wish I had said to you and to our whole family over these years. The greatest pain of my life was having to push you all away from me. But I had no choice. There were things happening that you didn't know about, things that could harm the entire family if I didn't take the measures I took. I know you've always faced financial difficulties, even with my secret help. I wish I could have done more, but my situation wasn't easy either. I had to sell almost everything your grandmother and I built over a lifetime to manage to help you. If you ever find these letters, I hope you can understand that everything I did was out of love, a love that never diminished, not even a little bit during all these years of separation. Seek the truth, my grandson. It is here, kept in this place. Do not let my passing be in vain. Do justice to the memory of our family. With all my eternal love, your Grandpa Walter." Connor was sobbing when he finished reading the letter. Next to the boxes of correspondence, there was a small wooden chest. Inside it, he found more documents and an old cassette tape with a label that read, "For whoever finds the truth." Also in the chest was a different key, larger than the first, with a tag that said, "Farmers Bank, Vault 847. Connor had never heard of any vault belonging to his grandfather, but it was obvious there were more secrets to be uncovered. He took the cassette tape and decided he needed to listen to it, but before that, he wanted to check the other boxes of letters. The box with his father's name, Raymond, was full of similar correspondence, all filled with love and longing, but also with apologies and vague explanations about why he had been forced to take certain actions. The box for his sister Ashley contained letters where his grandfather showed he knew every detail of her life, when she graduated from college, when she got married, when she had children. It was as if he had been following the family's life from a distance, even without direct contact. "How did he know all this?" murmured Connor, intrigued. He decided to take all the boxes home to study the contents more carefully. He also took the cassette tape, hoping to find some device where he could play it. Mr. Howard helped him load everything into the car and mentioned that his grandfather came to the storage unit at least once a week, always alone, always very discreet. "He would spend hours in here," Mr. Howard recounted. "Sometimes I'd hear him talking to himself, as if he were speaking to someone. I thought it was a bit strange, but he was an exemplary client, so I never interfered." At home, Connor found an old tape recorder in the attic and managed to play the tape. The trembling, emotional voice of his grandfather, Walter, echoed through the silent room. "If someone is listening to this recording, It's probably because I am no longer in this world and someone has found my secrets. I hope it is one of my children or grandchildren, because there are things I need to explain before it's too late. My name is Walter Mitchell. I'm 78 years old, and I am recording this on March 15th, 2024. 15 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I kicked my family out of the house and made them believe I didn't love them anymore. But the truth is very different. It all started a few weeks after my wife Dorothy passed away. I was devastated, lost, not knowing how to move forward. That's when a man appeared at my door, a man I had known for many years but hadn't seen in a long time. His name is Vernon Palmer, and he was once my partner in a small business we had a long time ago. Vernon came to tell me a terrible story. He said he had discovered old documents from our former company, documents that showed I had made a serious accounting error in the 90s. According to him, this error could be interpreted as tax evasion, and if the authorities found out, not only would I be harmed, but my entire family as well. He showed me papers, numbers, complex calculations that I couldn't fully understand. He said he had already consulted lawyers and that the case could result in prison for me and the confiscation of all the family's assets. My children would lose their homes. My grandchildren wouldn't be able to study. The whole family would be destroyed because of my mistake. But Vernon offered a solution. He said he could resolve everything, but that I would need to transfer all my assets to him as payment for his services and for his silence about the case. And more importantly, I would need to completely distance myself from the family to avoid raising suspicions about our dealings. I was desperate, in total panic. The idea that my family could suffer because of a past mistake of mine drove me crazy, so I agreed to everything Vernon asked. We staged that horrible fight so you would leave and not see the asset transfers happening. Gradually, Vernon took possession of almost everything: the farm, the bank accounts, the investments, even many of the house's furnishings. I was left with only the essentials to live and a small reserve I managed to hide from him, which I used to secretly help the family all these years. The worst part is that I never stopped loving you. Never. Every day away from the family was torture, but I believed I was protecting you. I thought it was better for you to hate me and be safe than to love me and risk losing everything. But now, near the end of my life, I've begun to suspect that maybe I was deceived. I consulted a young lawyer without telling the whole story, just asking about the statute of limitations on tax crimes. He told me that crimes of that type have a 10-year statute of limitations, and after that period they can no longer be prosecuted. It's been over 30 years since our company closed. Even if I really had made some mistake, today it could no longer be used against me or against you. I think Vernon deceived me, that he made it all up to take my assets legally. But now it's too late for me. I'm old, sick, without the strength to fight. I only hope someone in the family finds this recording and can discover the truth. In the safe deposit box at Farmers Bank, number 847, I left all the original documents from my company and the proof of everything Vernon did. The safe's combination is 15-112-1947, your grandmother Dorothy's birth date. Please, don't let my death be in vain. Discover the truth and recover what rightfully belongs to the family. But most of all, forgive an old fool who only wanted to protect the people he loved most in the world, even if in the wrong way. I love you all. I have always loved you, and I always will, even if you can never forgive me. The recording ended, and Connor sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything he had heard. The story was absurd, but it made sense. It explained why Grandpa had expelled the family so suddenly and cruelly. It also explained why he seemed to have sold almost all his assets over the years. But there was something that still didn't fit: the bank transfer receipts he had found. If Grandpa was sending money to the family, why had no one received anything? Where was that money going? Connor decided he needed to talk to his parents again, but this time armed with much more information. He also needed to go to the bank to check the safe deposit box mentioned in the recording. But before anything else, he needed to contact his siblings and tell them about the discoveries. He first called his sister Ashley, who lived in Springfield with her husband and 2 children. When he began to tell her about the letters and the recording, Ashley reacted with skepticism. "Connor, are you sure this isn't some kind of scam? People create fake documents all the time to trick grieving families." Ashley, I heard Grandpa's voice. It's him, I'm sure. And the letters are written in his handwriting, that handwriting we've known since we were kids. Even if it's true, what does it change now? Grandpa died, Connor. He chose to stay away from us for 15 years. He chose not to know my children, not to be part of our lives. It's no use showing up with excuses after he's dead. The conversation with Ashley left Connor frustrated. He understood his sister's hurt, but he had hoped she would be more receptive to the discovery of the truth. He decided to call his brother Derek, who lived in Chicago and worked at a tech company. "Man, this is crazy," was Derek's first reaction. "You're telling me Grandpa invented a fight with the family to protect us from a conman. Sounds like a soap opera plot." "I know it sounds absurd, but listen to the recording. It has his voice, Derek, and there are hundreds of letters he wrote to us all these years. Even if it's true, I agree with Ashley. 15 years, Connor. 15 years without a call, without contact, not even a Christmas card. My kids don't even know they had a great-grandfather. And now you want me to believe he did all this out of love?" The siblings' resistance was understandable, but painful for Connor. He was discovering that his grandfather had never stopped loving them, but he seemed to be the only one willing to accept that truth. He decided he needed more concrete evidence before trying to convince the rest of the family. The next day, he went to the Farmers Bank to check the safe deposit box mentioned in the recording. The manager, a middle-aged lady named Diane, confirmed that there was indeed a box registered in the name of Walter Mitchell, but said she could only grant access upon presentation of documents proving kinship and inheritance rights. "Can I bring the death certificate and my birth certificate?" asked Connor. "Yes, you can, but I must inform you that there is another person authorized to access this box, a Mr. Vernon Palmer. He was here a few months ago with a power of attorney from your grandfather." Connor's heart froze. Vernon Palmer was exactly the name mentioned in the recording as the man who had deceived his grandfather. If he had access to the box, he had probably already removed all the important documents. Did this man actually open the box? "I can't give specific details, but I can confirm that the box was accessed recently, yes." Connor left the bank with a mixture of anger and despair. If Vernon Palmer had really taken all the evidence from the box, it would be impossible to prove the story told by his grandfather. But there was still a possibility. Maybe his grandfather had hidden copies of the documents somewhere else. He returned to the abandoned house and began a systematic search for hiding places he hadn't yet discovered. He scoured every room, every piece of furniture, every crack that could hide documents. It was in the basement of the house that he finally found something interesting. Behind a wall that looked different from the others, he discovered a small secret compartment. Inside it was another box of documents, this one sealed with tape and a note stuck on the outside. "Only in case of extreme emergency, WM." Connor opened the box carefully and found copies of all the documents from his grandfather's old company, including the articles of incorporation, client contracts, income tax returns, and financial statements from the 90s. There was also a separate envelope with more recent photos and documents showing Vernon Palmer receiving properties and assets that once belonged to his grandfather. But the most shocking discovery was in a separate folder, documents showing that Vernon Palmer had pulled the same scam on other families in the area. There were similar contracts, powers of attorney signed under pressure, and even a handwritten list with the names of other victims. It was definitive proof that his grandfather had been deceived, but it also revealed that Vernon was a criminal who had been running this scam for years. Connor felt a mix of relief at confirming his grandfather's innocence and outrage at discovering the extent of that man's wickedness. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. With all this evidence in hand, Connor decided to seek a lawyer before confronting his family again. He knew a young and competent lawyer named Dr. Nathan Brooks, who had studied with him in college. He scheduled a meeting to show all the documents he had found. Dr. Nathan was impressed by the quantity and quality of the evidence Connor had gathered. "This is a serious case of fraud and embezzlement," explained the lawyer. "This Vernon Palmer not only deceived your grandfather, but also maintained the charade for 15 years, systematically draining the family's resources. But doctor, there's one thing I can't understand. I found receipts showing my grandfather made monthly transfers to accounts for our family, but no one ever received that money. Where was that money going? Dr. Nathan took the receipts and examined them carefully. These account numbers. Let me check something. He called a contact at the bank and after a few minutes of conversation, hung up with a serious expression. Connor, these accounts are not your family's. The numbers are similar, but with small differences. Someone created accounts with similar names to intercept your grandfather's transfers. How is that possible? Probably Vernon himself created these fake accounts. Your grandfather believed he was sending money directly to you all, but he was actually sending it to accounts controlled by the scammer. It's a common technique in this type of fraud. The revelation left Connor even more furious. Not only had he torn the family apart and stolen all of his grandfather's assets, but Vernon had also intercepted the old man's attempts to help his children and grandchildren. It was a level of malice hard to comprehend. What can I do, Doctor? How can I prove all this to my family and recover what was stolen? First, you need to file a police report against Vernon Palmer. Then we'll file a lawsuit to recover the assets that were illegally transferred. With all this evidence, we have a very strong case. And my family. How can I make them understand that Grandpa didn't abandon us out of malice? Dr. Nathan reflected for a moment before answering. The best approach would be to gather the whole family and present the evidence in an organized way. The letters, the recording, the documents, everything together paints a very clear picture of what really happened. But prepare for resistance. 15 years of hurt aren't overcome easily. Connor left the lawyer's office determined to confront Vernon Palmer before speaking with the family. He knew it would be dangerous, but he needed to hear the conman's version and, if possible, obtain a confession. He discovered that Vernon lived in a luxurious house in the most upscale neighborhood of Greenfield, probably bought with the money stolen from his grandfather and other victims. It was an imposing mansion, with well-kept gardens and imported cars in the garage, a stark contrast to the simple life his grandfather had led in his final years. When he rang the doorbell, he was greeted by a housekeeper who led him to an elegantly furnished room. A few minutes later, Vernon Palmer appeared, a man of about 70, well-dressed with the appearance of someone who lived comfortably. "How can I help you, young man?" "My name is Connor Mitchell. I'm Walter Mitchell's grandson." Vernon's expression changed immediately. The cordial smile turned into a mask of caution. "Ah, Walter's grandson. My condolences for your loss. Your grandfather was a complicated man." "Complicated?" Connor felt the anger growing inside him. "Complicated how exactly?" "Well, you know how he was. Stubborn, distrustful. In recent years he was getting a bit confused. Age, right? It happens to many elderly people. Funny you should say that, because I have here some documents my grandfather left. Documents that tell a very different story about you." Connor placed a folder on the coffee table and took out some of the evidence he had found. Vernon tried to maintain his composure, but his discomfort was visible. "I don't know what you're talking about, boy. Your grandfather and I were old friends, that's all. I helped him with some legal matters over the years." "Helped? Is that what you call stealing a family's entire assets? Inventing a story about tax crimes that never existed? Intercepting money meant for his children?" "Look here, young man." Vernon stood up, already losing patience. "I don't know what kind of fantasy your grandfather put in your head, but all transactions between us were completely legal. I have documents signed by him authorizing everything. Documents signed under coercion based on lies. You invented that my grandfather had committed crimes that never existed, and worse, you're still running the same scam on other families." "You can't prove any of that," Vernon replied, but his voice trembled slightly. "And I suggest you leave my house before I call security. I don't need to prove anything to you. I'll prove it in court, with all the documents my grandfather hid before passing. He knew you were a con man, and he left everything recorded." Vernon paled upon hearing this. Evidently he didn't know about the existence of the secret hiding place in the house's basement. "Even if you have some old papers, it changes nothing. All assets were transferred legally, with documents registered at the notary. It's impossible to reverse it after so long." "We'll see. My lawyer thinks we have a very strong case, especially with the recording where my grandfather explains in detail how you deceived him." "What recording?" The question came out before Vernon could control himself, revealing that he truly didn't know about all the documentation the grandfather had left. Connor smiled inwardly, realizing he had an advantage. "Oh, you didn't know? My grandfather recorded a full confession before passing. He explained the whole scheme, from the first day to the intercepted transfers. It's very detailed." That can't be right. Walter was never clever enough to what? To figure out he was being deceived? You underestimated my grandfather, Mr. Palmer. He may have been naive at first, but he wasn't stupid. Vernon began pacing the room nervously, clearly worried about the revelations. "Listen, boy. Perhaps we can reach an agreement. Your grandfather owed me some favors, some services I provided over the years. But I understand the family might have a different perspective. What if I returned part of what was transferred?" "Part? You stole my family's entire life. 15 years of separation, 15 years of financial hardship, 15 years my grandfather spent alone and suffering because of your lies." "It wasn't quite like that. It was exactly like that, and I won't accept any deal. I'm going to expose everything you did, to the law and to the whole community. The other families you deceived deserve to know the truth too." Vernon stopped walking and turned to Connor with a more aggressive expression. "You don't know who you're messing with, kid. I have very good lawyers. I have influence in this town. If you try to harm me, you'll regret it." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm just warning you. Sometimes it's better to leave the past where it is. Your grandfather died, his property will be sold anyway, and you'll all move on with your lives. Why stir up things that will only bring trouble?" Connor stood up, took the documents, and headed for the door. "Because the truth matters, Mr. Palmer. My grandfather deserves to have his memory cleared, and my family deserves to know he never stopped loving us." He left the house certain he had made the right decision. Vernon's reaction confirmed everything in his grandfather's recordings and documents. Now he needed to gather the courage to confront his own family with all these revelations. He decided to start with his mother, Beverly, who had always been more sensitive and understanding than his father. He arrived at her house in the afternoon, when he knew Raymond would be working at the shop. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something very important. It's about Grandpa Walter." Beverly sighed and motioned for him to sit in the kitchen. "Connor, my son, I know you've been upset about your grandfather's death, but dwelling on the past won't help. What happened, happened. Mom, just listen to this." Connor placed the recorder on the table and started playing the tape. As Grandpa Walter's voice filled the kitchen, Beverly grew pale. Her hands trembled and her eyes filled with tears. When the recording ended, she remained silent for several minutes. "My God," she finally whispered. "Walter. Poor Walter. Do you believe it, Mom?" "Connor, there are things you don't know. Things I never told anyone, not even your father." Beverly dried her tears with her apron. "All these years, money would sometimes appear in our account mysteriously. Not a lot, but enough to pay a late electricity bill or buy medicine when someone was sick. Did you know where it came from?" "I suspected, but your father forbade any investigation. He said if it was dirty money we could get in trouble, so we never asked where it came from. But Mom, the receipts I found at Grandpa's house show he was making regular transfers. Why weren't you receiving that money?" "Because it was probably being stolen along the way." Beverly got up and went to a kitchen drawer. She took out a yellowed envelope and handed it to Connor. "I've kept this for years, not knowing what to do." Inside the envelope were several anonymous letters that had arrived by mail over the years. They weren't signed, but the handwriting was unmistakably Grandpa Walter's. The letters spoke of longing, regret, about a love that had never diminished. "Why did you never show me these?" "Your father wouldn't allow it. He said they were pranks from someone trying to harm us, but I always knew they were from your grandfather. I recognized his handwriting, his way of speaking. And the money that appeared mysteriously. It always came after we had some difficulty. When your father got sick and missed some days of work, when you needed expensive school supplies, when Ashley got married and we needed money for the party, it was as if someone was watching over our family and helping when necessary." Connor felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief to confirm that his grandfather had indeed tried to help the family all those years, and sadness to realize that his mother had also suffered in silence, suspecting the truth but being prevented from investigating. "Mom, I need to tell all of this to Dad and my siblings. They need to know the truth." "It will be difficult, my son. Your father, he suffered a lot from this separation, more than he showed. But his pride never allowed him to admit he might have made a mistake." "And my siblings? Ashley and Derek also suffered. Especially Ashley, who was your grandfather's favorite grandchild. She never fully got over the fact that he rejected our attempts at reconciliation." "But Mom, from the documents I found, Grandpa never rejected anything. He was being forced to keep his distance by that con man, that Vernon Palmer." Beverly shook her head, still processing all the information. "How can a person be so evil? To separate an entire family, to make an old man spend his last years alone and suffering? I don't know, Mom, but now that we know the truth, I need to do something. I can't let that man keep everything he stole from Grandpa." "And your sister and brother? Are you going to tell them?" "I will. But I want you to help me. They respect your opinion, especially Ashley. If you say you believe the story, maybe they will too." Beverly agreed to help, but warned it would be a difficult conversation. Raymond would be home in a few hours, and it would be best to tell him everything too, even knowing the reaction wouldn't be positive. When Raymond arrived from the workshop, he found Connor and Beverly in the living room, with several documents scattered on the coffee table. His first reaction was irritation. "What is all this mess here?" "Raymond, sit down. You need to hear something about your father," said Beverly, using a tone that brooked no argument. Reluctantly, Raymond sat down and listened to the recording. His expression gradually changed from irritation to bewilderment, then to sadness, and finally to anger. "That scoundrel Vernon," he exploded when the recording ended. "I always suspected that man. I always thought it was strange he showed up in our lives right after Mom died." "So you believe Grandpa's story?" "Of course I believe it. I recognize my father's voice, I recognize his way of speaking, and it explains a lot of things that never made sense." "What kind of things?" "The way he kicked us out of the house out of nowhere without explanation. My father was never a violent or cruel man. I knew something was wrong, but my pride wouldn't let me investigate further." Raymond stood up and started pacing the room, running his hands through his hair. 15 years, Connor. 15 years I believed my father had abandoned us out of selfishness. 15 years I spoke ill of him to you, to the neighbors, to anyone who asked about our family. Dad, you didn't know, no one knew. But I should have investigated. I should have insisted more. I should have searched for the truth instead of accepting that senseless version. Beverly approached her husband and put her hand on his shoulder. "Raymond, there's no use blaming yourself now. What's important is that we discovered the truth, and now you need to decide what we're going to do with it." "What are we going to do?" "We're going after that bastard Vernon, and we're going to make him pay for everything he did to our family." Connor showed his father all the other documents he had found, including the evidence that Vernon was pulling the same scam on other families. Raymond grew even more indignant as he realized the extent of the crimes. That man destroyed our family for 15 years, and probably destroyed other families too. He can't go unpunished. "I've already looked for a lawyer, Dad. He said we have a strong case, but it will take time to recover the assets, and even if we succeed, it won't bring Grandpa back. It won't bring your grandfather back, but it will clear his memory. And that's important, Connor, very important." The conversation lasted until late at night, with Raymond asking questions about every document, every detail of the discovery. It was clear he was feeling guilty for having believed the lying version for so long. "Tomorrow I'm going to talk to Ashley and Derek," said Connor, "but it will be hard to convince them." "I'll talk to them," offered Raymond. "I'm the father. I should have discovered the truth a long time ago. It's my responsibility to tell them how our family was deceived." The next day, Raymond called Ashley and Derek, asking them to come to Greenfield for the weekend. He only said they had discovered important things about their grandfather and needed to meet as a family to discuss the matter. Ashley arrived on Saturday morning, bringing her husband Trevor and their 2 young children. Derek drove in from Chicago with his wife Christine. The last time the whole family had gathered was at Grandma Dorothy's funeral 15 years ago. Before anything else, began Raymond, when everyone was seated in the living room, I want to apologize to you. I'm sorry for keeping our family away from Grandpa Walter all these years, and I'm sorry for not investigating the truth when it was still possible to make peace with him. Ashley and Derek exchanged confused looks. They weren't expecting an apology from their father, much less one related to their grandfather. Dad, what are you talking about? Asked Ashley. I'm talking about this. Raymond picked up the recorder and played the tape. The siblings' reaction was similar to what Connor had witnessed in his parents. First disbelief, then shock, and finally a mix of sadness and anger. Ashley started crying even before the recording finished. No, it can't be true, she sobbed. Grandpa can't have spent all these years suffering alone. Derek remained silent until the end of the recording, processing every word. When the tape ended, he shook his head in disbelief. 15 years. For 15 years we believed he had abandoned us, and he was trying to protect us the whole time. And that wasn't all, added Connor, showing the boxes of letters. He wrote to all of us all these years. He never stopped thinking about the family, never stopped loving us. Ashley picked up the letters addressed to her and began to read. With each letter, she cried more intensely. In them, her grandfather showed he knew every detail of her life, her graduation, her marriage, the birth of her children, her professional achievements. How did he know all this? How did he keep up with our lives if he was forbidden from contacting us? Probably through neighbors, acquaintances, people who moved between our family and the community, explained Beverly. Mrs. Ethel, who lived near him, always knew everything that happened in our family through the other neighbors. Derek was also reading his letters, his eyes misty. Listen to this. I heard you got promoted at the company, my grandson. I always knew you were smart and hard-working. I wish so much I could celebrate this achievement with you, but I'm happy to know you're building a good life for your family. He stopped reading and looked at the others. He knew details only the family knew. And there was more, continued Connor. He was trying to help financially too. I found receipts for transfers he made monthly to accounts in all our names. But we never received anything, said Ashley, confused, because the money was being intercepted. The same con artist who stole Grandpa's assets also created fake accounts to intercept his attempts to help. The revelation left the entire family outraged. The idea that their grandfather had tried to help them financially all those years, but the money was being stolen, was almost unbearable. That Vernon Palmer, growled Derek. Where is he? I want to talk to that bastard. Derek, calm down, intervened Christine, his wife. Let the justice system handle this. You have enough evidence to sue him. Christine is right, agreed Trevor, Ashley's husband. As upset as we are, we have to resolve this through legal channels. I've already found a lawyer, Connor informed them. He said we'll be able to recover at least some of the assets, but it will take time. I don't care about the time, said Ashley, drying her tears. I care that Grandpa's memory is cleared. For 15 years we spoke ill of him. For 15 years my children grew up thinking their great-grandfather was a bad man. Mom, what great-grandfather? Asked Ethan, Ashley's 8-year-old son. A great-grandfather you should have known, my son. A great-grandfather who loved you very much, even though he never saw you. The family spent the rest of the day talking about the discoveries, reading letters, examining documents, and planning the next steps. It was an emotionally intense gathering with many tears, much regret, but also with a sense of relief at finally knowing the truth. You know what hurts me the most, said Raymond late in the afternoon. It's knowing that my father died alone, believing that the whole family hated him. He never knew that we would have forgiven him if we had known the truth. Dad, maybe he did know, suggested Connor. In the last letters, he showed hope that one day someone would discover the truth. I think he had faith in the family, even after everything. Hope, murmured Ashley. I like to think he had hope. It makes everything a little less painful. Derek, who had remained quiet for a while, finally spoke. Everyone, I have a proposal. What if we restored Grandpa's house? Instead of selling it, what if we turned it into a place where our family could gather regularly? Derek, it will be a lot of work, began Ashley. And it will be expensive, added Raymond. I don't care about the work or the cost. Derek stood up, excited by the idea. Just think, for the last 15 years our family has been scattered, each in their own lives with little contact. Grandpa's death brought us together again. What if we used this to stay united? The idea pleased everyone. Trevor, who worked in construction, offered to coordinate the restoration work. Ashley suggested they turn one of the rooms into a kind of memorial for their grandfather, with his photos, letters, and belongings. "And what do we do about Vernon Palmer?" asked Derek. "Leave it to me," replied Raymond, with a determined tone. "That man will pay for everything he did to our family." In the following days, the family immersed themselves in the task of organizing all the evidence for the legal proceedings. Dr. Nathan Brooks, Connor's lawyer, was impressed with the amount of evidence they had gathered. "With all this material, we have a very solid case," he explained during a meeting at his office. "We will not only recover your grandfather's assets, but also prosecute him criminally for fraud and embezzlement." "And the other families he deceived?" asked Ashley. "Can't we do anything for them?" "Yes, we can. With the evidence you found, I can contact other victims and help them recover their assets too. This man will likely face multiple lawsuits." The first step was to file a formal police report. Raymond insisted on accompanying Connor to the police station, where they presented all the evidence to the officer in charge. "In 30 years on the job, I've rarely seen a case so well documented," commented the officer, after examining the materials. "This Mr. Vernon Palmer is going to have a lot of explaining to do." The news of the case spread quickly through the small community of Greenfield. Many people remembered Grandpa Walter as a hard-working and honest man, and were shocked to learn he had been the victim of such an elaborate scam. Mrs. Ethel, the neighbor who had found Grandpa's body, sought out the family to share more details about the last years of his life. "Mr. Walter was a very sad man," she told Connor and Raymond. "He was always talking about his family, always asking how you all were. I knew he got information through other people, but I never understood why he didn't try to get closer to you. Now we understand, Mrs. Ethel. He was being prevented by this con man. What a tragedy, my God. And here I was, sometimes judging him for not reaching out to his family. If I had known the truth." "You couldn't have known, Ma'am. No one could. The scam was very well planned." Mrs. Ethel also shared that Grandpa kept a small garden in the backyard where he grew flowers and vegetables. All the produce from the garden he donated to needy families in the neighborhood. "It was the way he found to do good, since he couldn't help his own family," she explained. The revelation moved the family, who decided to also restore Grandpa's garden as part of the house renovation. Ashley, who had always enjoyed gardening, took on the responsibility of caring for the plants. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings against Vernon Palmer were advancing quickly. The man hired expensive lawyers to defend himself, but the evidence against him was irrefutable. "He's trying to claim all the transactions were legal," explained Dr. Nathan during an update on the case. "But we have the recording of your grandfather explaining how he was coerced, we have the fake documents he used to scare the elderly man, and we have evidence that he pulled the same scam on other people." "When will the trial be?" asked Derek. "It will still take a few months. But in the meantime, I've obtained an injunction freezing his accounts and prohibiting him from selling the properties he obtained illegally." The news that Vernon's assets were frozen spread through the town, and other victims began approaching Dr. Nathan to report similar cases. Within a few weeks, the lawyer was representing 5 different families who had been deceived by the same con man. "This man is a professional criminal," Dr. Nathan explained to the Mitchell family. "He would study families in situations of emotional vulnerability and always apply the same scheme. He'd invent some legal threat, offer a solution that involved transferring assets to him, and then keep the victims away from their loved ones to prevent them from discovering the scam." During this period, the family worked on restoring Grandpa's house. Trevor coordinated the carpentry and painting work, while Beverly and Ashley took care of the cleaning and internal organization. Derek and Connor focused on the electrical and plumbing work. "It's amazing how this house is coming back to life," commented Ashley on a Saturday afternoon as she watched the progress of the work. "Grandpa would be happy to see the family gathered here again," said Raymond, who was helping Trevor fix the roof boards. "Dad, look at this," shouted Connor from inside the house. "I found something else." Everyone ran to see what Connor had discovered. At the back of a drawer they were cleaning, he had found a small wooden box with an old lock. "Where do you think the key is?" asked Derek. Maybe this is the one, suggested Connor, trying the small key he had found on the first day. The key worked perfectly. Inside the box was a small leather wallet with some old photos and an amount of money that surprised everyone. There must be about 5,000 rays here, calculated Raymond, counting the bills. And look at these photos, said Ashley, moved. The photos showed family moments from decades ago. Birthdays, weddings, baptisms, Sunday gatherings. In all of them, Grandpa Walter appeared smiling, surrounded by the family he loved. He kept all this all these years, murmured Beverly with teary eyes. There was also a note in Grandpa's handwriting. For family emergencies, with love, Walter. Even in the end he was thinking of us, said Derek, visibly moved. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The restoration work continued for several weeks. Each day the house regained its former beauty, but with a new touch that reflected the care and affection of the reunited family. Ashley set up a small exhibition in the main bedroom with Grandpa's letters, organized chronologically to show how his love for the family had never diminished over the years. Each letter was protected in a simple frame, creating an emotional panel that told the story of the 15-year separation. Derek took care of modernizing the kitchen, keeping its rustic charm but making it functional for family gatherings. He installed a new stove, a large refrigerator and a wide table where everyone could sit comfortably. Connor took responsibility for restoring the living room, placing comfortable armchairs and a bookshelf for the books Grandpa had collected throughout his life. Many of the books had notes in the margins, reflections that showed how thoughtful and cultured he was. Look at this, said Connor, showing a note Grandpa had made in a philosophy book. He wrote, "True wisdom lies in knowing when to sacrifice one's own happiness for the good of the people we love." He was referring to his own situation, observed Raymond. He sacrificed his happiness to protect our family. But did it have to be that way? Questioned Ashley. If he had told us the truth from the start, maybe we could have found a solution together. Ashley, you need to understand that Grandpa was desperate, explained Beverly. When someone we trust threatens us with the possibility of our family being destroyed, we don't think clearly. We react with our hearts, trying to protect those we love the best way we can. Mom is right, agreed Derek. Vernon was very convincing. He had documents, seemed to know the law. For a man of Grandpa's age, recently widowed and emotionally fragile, those threats must have seemed very real. While restoring the house, the family also followed the unfolding of the legal proceedings. Vernon Palmer tried in every way to avoid trial, offering settlements and claiming health problems, but Dr. Nathan was inflexible. "We won't accept any settlement," explained the lawyer. "This man needs to answer fully for the crimes he committed. Besides, other families are counting on us to get justice." Indeed, the case had gained attention in the local press, and several other victims of Vernon began to come forward. Mrs. Margaret, a 70-year-old woman, said she had lost her country house to the same scammer 5 years earlier. Mr. Albert, a retiree, revealed that Vernon had taken his savings using similar tactics. "It's infuriating to discover how many people this man has harmed," commented Ashley during a family meeting. "How many families has he torn apart? How many elderly has he deceived?" "That's why we can't give up," replied Raymond. "It's not just for Grandpa Walter's memory. It's for all those people who were harmed." During the restoration work, the family made touching discoveries about the lonely life their grandfather had led in his final years. In the attic, they found a calendar where he had marked the birthdays of all family members, with little notes about gifts he would have liked to give each one. "Look here," said Connor, flipping through the calendar. "On my 25th birthday," he wrote, "I'd like to give Connor a good watch. He's graduating as an engineer and will need to be punctual at work." "And at my wedding," added Ashley, her voice choked, he wrote, "My little granddaughter is getting married today. I so wish I could be there to dance with her as I promised when she was little." These discoveries were simultaneously comforting and painful. Comforting because they confirmed that their grandfather had never stopped loving the family, but painful because they showed how much unnecessary suffering everyone had endured. In the basement of the house, Derek found an improvised workshop where their grandfather repaired furniture and broken items to donate to families in need. There were restored chairs, repaired toys, refurbished appliances, all with small tags indicating who they were meant for. For Mrs. Helen's family, who lost everything in the fire, read Derek on a tag stuck to a small table. For Mr. Paul's children, who have no toys, said another, on a carefully mended cloth doll. He turned his pain into generosity, observed Beverly. Instead of becoming bitter, he used his free time to help other people. The workshop was restored and kept as it was, as another tribute to their grandfather's memory. Trevor installed proper lighting and organized the tools, turning the space into a functional area the family could use for small repairs and projects. Parallel to the restoration work, Dr. Nathan continued gathering evidence for the lawsuit. The lawyer discovered that Vernon maintained a complex network of bank accounts and properties registered under third-party names to hinder investigations. "This man is more sophisticated than we imagined," explained Dr. Nathan in a meeting. "He didn't just steal from his victims, but also laundered the money through a series of complex transactions." "Does that mean it will be harder to recover Grandpa's assets?" asked Derek. "Actually, it means we have evidence of even more serious crimes. Money laundering is a federal crime which can carry a much heavier sentence." "I don't care about his sentence," said Raymond. "I just want him to return what he stole from our family and the other families." "We will achieve that. His accounts are already frozen, the properties can't be sold, and we're tracking all the assets he acquired with the victims' money." While awaiting the trial, the family dedicated themselves to finishing the restoration of the house. The garden, under Ashley's care, bloomed again with the same plants their grandfather used to grow. She found seeds stored in small envelopes labeled in his handwriting, each with instructions on when to plant and how to care for them. "He knew that one day someone would continue his work," said Ashley, planting tomato seedlings, religiously following the instructions left by her grandfather. The house, which had been empty and deteriorating for months, began to pulse with life again. On weekends, the whole family gathered to work on the restoration, cook together, and talk about their lives. The youngest grandchildren, who had never met their great-grandfather, listened to stories about him and learned to love him through the adults' memories. "Grandma, was Great-Grandpa a good man?" asked little Ethan, Ashley's son, while helping plant flowers in the garden. "Great-Grandpa was the kindest man in the world," replied Beverly with tears in her eyes. "He loved our family more than anything in life." "Then why did he leave?" "He didn't leave, my dear. He was tricked by a bad person who made him believe he had to stay away from us to protect us. But now he's in heaven, right? And he can see that we found out the truth. I'm sure he is, little Ethan. I'm sure Great-Grandpa is happy to see our family together again." Conversations like this became common during the restoration work. The adults found ways to explain the situation to the children, turning a story of pain and separation into a lesson about forgiveness, family, and the importance of fighting for the truth. Christine, Derek's wife, suggested creating a photo album of the entire house restoration process, from the state of abandonment to the complete transformation. This way, future generations will be able to see how the family came together to honor Grandpa Walter's memory, she explained, taking photos of each stage of the work. "Good idea," agreed Trevor. "We can also include some of his letters and old photos. It will be a complete record of the whole story." The album became a family project, with everyone contributing photos, documents, and written testimonies. Ashley wrote a letter addressed to her children, explaining the whole situation and the lessons she had learned from discovering the truth. Derek wrote a technical account of the entire investigation process, from the first key found to the evidence gathered for the court case. Connor contributed reflections on the importance of not giving up the search for truth, even when it seems unlikely. Raymond wrote a letter of apology addressed to his late father, asking for forgiveness for having doubted his character and promising to honor his memory for the rest of his life. Beverly contributed recipes her mother-in-law had taught her, dishes that Grandpa Walter liked to eat, and that would be prepared again at family gatherings. "This album will be our family's most precious treasure," said Ashley, flipping through the already organized pages. "More precious than the assets we're going to recover from Vernon," agreed Derek. "Money and property can be lost again, but family unity is forever. Finally, after months of preparation, the date of Vernon Palmer's trial arrived. The case had attracted significant attention in town, and the courthouse was packed with onlookers and other victims of the scammer. Vernon appeared accompanied by two experienced lawyers, trying to maintain an appearance of dignity, but his nervousness was visible. He was already much thinner and more worn down than when Connor had confronted him at his home months before. Dr. Nathan presented the case masterfully, organizing the evidence chronologically and didactically. He began by explaining how Vernon chose his victims, always elderly people, recently widowed, emotionally vulnerable, and how he developed their trust through old relationships or mutual acquaintances. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," said Dr. Nathan during his opening statement, "this is not just a case of theft. It is a case of calculated cruelty, where the defendant not only appropriated his victim's assets, but also destroyed family relationships, causing years of unnecessary suffering." Grandpa Walter's recording was played in the courtroom, causing a visible stir among those present. Several people, including other elderly individuals who identified with the situation, began to cry upon hearing the old man's emotional account. "This recording," continued Dr. Nathan, "clearly shows how the defendant manipulated an honest, hard-working man, using his emotional vulnerability after the loss of his wife to systematically extort him for 15 years. Vernon's lawyers tried to question the authenticity of the recording and argued that all transactions had been legal and consensual. But the evidence presented by the family was irrefutable. Connor was called to testify and recounted in great detail how he had discovered his grandfather's secrets and how he had gathered all the evidence against Vernon. His narrative was clear and moving, highlighting not only the financial crimes, but also the emotional suffering caused to the family. "For 15 years, Connor said in his testimony, our family believed that my grandfather had abandoned us out of selfishness. 15 years of pain, of resentment, of an old man who died believing his own family hated him. That is priceless, members of the jury. That cannot be recovered with money." Raymond also testified, speaking about the impact the forced separation had caused in the family and about his guilt for not investigating more thoroughly at the time of the fight. "A son should trust his father," he said, his voice choked, "but I let pride speak louder than love. If I had insisted more, if I had sought the truth at the time, perhaps my father would not have spent his final years alone." Mrs. Margaret, one of Vernon's other victims, also gave testimony, telling how she had lost the house she had lived in for 40 years through the same scheme of emotional blackmail. "He told me that my late husband had committed irregularities in the house's paperwork," she recounted through tears. "Said that if I didn't transfer the property to him, I could go to jail and my children would lose everything. I was alone, scared, not understanding anything about laws. I believed him." The most impactful testimony came from Mr. Albert, an 80-year-old retiree who had lost all his savings to Vernon 3 years earlier. "He convinced me that my pension was being investigated by Social Security for alleged irregularities," the elderly man recounted. "Said that if I didn't pay a specific amount to regularize the situation, I would lose the benefit and would even have to repay everything I had already received. It was money I didn't have, so I offered the savings of a lifetime of work." When it was the defense's turn, Vernon's lawyers tried a desperate strategy, claiming the defendant was senile and not fully aware of his actions. But the very sophistication of the criminal scheme contradicted this version. Dr. Nathan, in his rebuttal, was devastating. "Members of the jury, if the defendant was truly senile, how did he manage to maintain such a complex scheme for so many years? How did he manage to create fake accounts, forge documents, manipulate multiple victims simultaneously? Senility is not selective, gentlemen. Either the defendant was mentally incapable of committing these crimes, or he was fully aware and must answer for them." The trial lasted 3 days. On the 3rd day, the jury withdrew to deliberate and returned after 2 hours with a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. Vernon Palmer was sentenced to 12 years in prison for fraud, embezzlement, racketeering, and money laundering. In addition to the prison sentence, he was ordered to return all assets he had obtained illegally, including the properties, bank accounts, and investments made with the victim's money. "Justice has been served," Dr. Nathan said to the family after the sentence was read. "Now we will work to effectively recover your assets." "Doctor," Raymond said, shaking the lawyer's hand, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for our family." "No need to thank me. It was a privilege to work on a case where the truth was so clear and justice so necessary. Outside the courthouse, the family was surrounded by journalists and other victims' relatives. Connor gave a brief interview, highlighting not just the legal victory, but especially the importance of never giving up the search for truth. "Our greatest victory wasn't the money we're going to recover," he said to the cameras. "Our greatest victory was discovering that my grandfather never stopped loving us, and that our family can unite again around his memory." Ashley, visibly moved, added, "I hope our story serves as an example for other families. It's never too late to discover the truth. Never too late to reconcile, never too late to forgive." In the following months, the asset recovery process advanced quickly. With Vernon convicted and his resources exhausted, there were no more legal obstacles to compensating the victims. The family's original property, which Vernon had taken from Grandpa Walter, was fully returned. Bank accounts were unblocked and the funds transferred back to the rightful heirs. Investments made with stolen money were liquidated, and the value distributed among the victims proportionally to their losses. "It's astonishing," commented Derek, examining the restitution documents. "Grandpa had much more resources than we imagined. Vernon stole hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. But what impresses me most," said Ashley, "is that even with so little money left, he still managed to secretly help our family all these years." Indeed, a detailed analysis of the finances revealed that, even after Vernon's misappropriations, Grandpa Walter had set aside a small portion of his resources specifically to help the family. The $500 monthly he tried to send to each member represented a significant part of his limited income. "He deprived himself of personal comfort to try to take care of us," observed Connor. "That makes everything even more touching." With the financial situation resolved, the family made some important decisions about the future. First, they decided to complete the restoration of Grandpa's house with the recovered funds, turning it definitively into a family gathering place. Second, they created an educational fund in memory of Grandpa Walter, aimed at helping underprivileged youth in the region pay for their higher education. It was a way to perpetuate the generous spirit he had demonstrated throughout his life. "Grandpa always believed in the importance of education," explained Connor during the fund's creation ceremony. "He wanted all his grandchildren to study and have better opportunities than he did. Now we can extend that opportunity to other young people." Third, they decided to keep the workshop in the house's basement active, continuing the work of restoring furniture and objects for donation that Grandpa had started. Derek took over coordinating this project, teaching his own children and nephews the art of woodworking. "It's a way to keep his spirit alive," explained Derek, "to transform our own pain into generosity for others in need." The restored house was officially inaugurated on a Sunday in October, exactly 1 year after Grandpa Walter's death. The whole family was present, including uncles, cousins, and distant relatives who had reconnected after discovering the truth about the family separation. Mrs. Ethel, the neighbor who had cared for Grandpa in his final days, was the guest of honor at the inauguration. "Mr. Walter would be so happy seeing all this," she said, walking through the restored rooms. "He dreamed of having the family gathered here again." "And now we do," replied Beverly, thanks to Connor's courage in seeking the truth. "It wasn't just my courage," protested Connor. "It was Grandpa's love for all of us that guided us to the truth. He left all the necessary clues, hoping that one day someone would find them. The inauguration included a simple ceremony where each family member planted a fruit tree in the garden, symbolizing the growth and continuity of the reunited family. The youngest children, who had never met their great-grandfather in life, participated actively, learning about his story and his legacy. "Great-Grandpa Walter couldn't be here with us," said little Ethan, Ashley's son, during the ceremony. "But he is in our hearts and will be whenever we gather in this house." The child's simple phrase perfectly summed up the feeling of the entire family. Grandpa had departed physically, but his presence was felt in every corner of the restored house, in every story told. in every moment of family togetherness. In the late afternoon, when all the guests had left, the immediate family gathered in the living room for a moment of private reflection. Raymond took one of the last letters Grandpa had written and read it aloud. "If someone is reading this letter, it is because the truth has finally come to light. I hope you can forgive me for choosing the most difficult path, for causing so much suffering while trying to avoid it. My only consolation all these years was knowing that, even from afar, I loved you deeply, and I held on to hope that one day that love would be returned again. If you are gathered now, it means my faith in the family was not in vain. Do not hold a grudge against Vernon Palmer. He is a man who lost his humanity at some point in life, and that is punishment enough. Focus your energy on the love you feel for one another, on the unity that has always been our greatest strength. Take care of this house as you cared for my heart, with patience, affection, and dedication. Make it a place where love is always stronger than pride, where truth is always more important than convenience. And always remember, a family is not just people who share the same blood. A family is people who choose to stay together, who choose to support each other, who choose to forgive when necessary. You have made that choice. I am proud of all of you. With all my eternal love, Walter Mitchell." When Raymond finished reading, there was a long silence. Tears streamed down the faces of everyone present, but they were tears of peace, not sadness. "He did it," said Ashley finally. "Even after his death, he managed to reunite our family again. And now it's up to us to maintain that unity," added Derek, "to make his sacrifice worthwhile." "We will," affirmed Connor, "because now we know the value of what we have. We know that family is the most precious thing there is." Sundays at Grandpa's house became a tradition. Every week, without exception, the family gathered for lunch together, talked about their lives, and kept alive the bonds that were almost lost. The children grew up hearing stories about great-grandpa Walter, learning about his character, his generosity, his values. They also learned about the importance of seeking the truth, of not accepting easy answers when something doesn't make sense, of fighting for what is right even when it's hard. The educational fund created in Grandpa's memory had already benefited dozens of underprivileged youth in the region. Many of them visited the house on weekends, helping with woodworking and gardening projects, learning not just practical skills but also human values. "Grandpa Walter's legacy goes beyond our family," observed Beverly during one of those Sundays. "He is influencing the lives of people he never even met." "That's how it should be," replied Raymond. "True love always multiplies, always finds ways to grow and benefit other people." Vernon Palmer was arrested and served his full sentence. When he left prison years later, he was a completely different man, humble, remorseful, trying to rebuild his life far from the city where he had caused so much harm. Surprisingly, it was Raymond who first proposed the family forgive him. "Not for him," Raymond explained during a family meeting, "but for us. Hatred hurts the one who hates, not the one who is hated. If we truly want to honor Grandpa Walter's memory, we need to forgive as he asked in the letter." The forgiveness wasn't easy or immediate. It took time, difficult conversations, moments of doubt, but eventually the family managed to leave the bitterness behind and focus on the future they were building together. Grandpa's house became a symbol in the community. Other families going through conflicts would come seeking advice and inspiration. Mrs. Ethel, who had become a sort of unofficial guardian of Walter's memory, would tell his story to anyone who would listen. "The most important lesson," she always said, "is that it's never too late to discover the truth, never too late to forgive, never too late to start over." Dr. Nathan Brooks became a close friend of the family, regularly attending Sunday lunches. He also used the case as an example in his lectures on elderly rights, warning about common scams that victimize vulnerable people. "The Mitchell family case," he always said in his talks, "shows that justice may be slow, but when it finally arrives, it has the power to heal very old wounds." 5 years after the discovery of the truth, Connor married a young teacher named Rebecca, who quickly became fully integrated into the family. The ceremony was held in the garden of Grandpa's house, with the fruit trees they had planted already bearing abundant fruit. "It would be perfect if Great-Grandpa could be here," Rebecca said, during the wedding preparations. "He is," Ashley replied, pointing to the portrait of Grandpa that decorated the room. "In a way, he's always been present in all the important moments of our family." Derek opened his own woodworking shop, specializing in restoring antique furniture. Many of his clients were people who had heard the family's story and wanted to restore objects with sentimental value. The shop also became a training center for underprivileged youth, continuing the social work started at Grandpa's house. Ashley returned to studying, taking a landscaping course to deepen her gardening knowledge. She transformed the garden of Grandpa's house into a model of sustainability, with an organic vegetable garden, composting, and medicinal plants. The space became a regional reference for those wanting to learn natural cultivation techniques. Raymond retired from the auto repair shop and began dedicating more time to his grandchildren, teaching them the values he learned from his own father. He created a small informal museum in the house, with Grandpa's personal belongings and documents that told the family's story. Beverly became a respected storyteller in the community, visiting schools and nursing homes to talk about the importance of family, forgiveness, and perseverance. Her narrative about the discovery of the truth about Grandpa Walter moved audiences of all ages. "Life," she always concluded her presentations, "teaches us that things aren't always as they seem. That's why it's so important to keep your heart open to forgiveness and your mind open to truth." The Mitchell family story spread beyond the borders of Greenfield. Journalists from other states came to interview family members interested in the case that had brought together several important issues: scams against the elderly, family separation, the search for truth, and the power of forgiveness. A documentary was produced telling the whole story, from the initial fight to the restoration of the house and the family's reunion. The film was shown at festivals and used in awareness campaigns about elderly rights. "I never imagined our personal story could help so many people," commented Connor during the documentary premiere. "Grandpa Walter was always generous," replied Raymond. "It's only natural that even our pain transforms into something useful for others." 10 years after the truth was discovered, the grandfather's house had become a true community center. Beyond the Sunday family gatherings, the location hosted support groups for the elderly, woodworking and gardening classes, and meetings for families in the process of reconciliation. A small library was installed in one of the rooms, with books donated by the community and works on topics related to family, aging, and conflict resolution. The library bore the name Walter Mitchell and primarily served underprivileged students in the region. The educational fund created in the grandfather's memory had already benefited over 100 young people, many of whom returned as volunteers after graduating, creating a virtuous cycle of gratitude and solidarity. "It's impressive how one person can influence so many lives, even after death," reflected Rebecca, Connor's wife, during one of the Sunday lunches. "Grandpa always said that true immortality lies in the good we do for others," Ashley remembered. "Every person we help, every life we touch, is a way of continuing to exist in the world." The tradition of Sunday lunches was strictly maintained over the years. Even when some family members moved to other cities for professional reasons, they always made a point of returning to Greenfield on weekends, or at least once a month. Grandpa Walter's grandchildren, who were now adults with their own children, told the little ones the story of the great-grandfather they never met in person, but who was present in their lives through family values and traditions. "Grandma, was the great-great-grandfather sad because he was alone?" asked Victoria, Joachim's great-granddaughter, just 5 years old. "He was sad for a time," explained Beverly, now an experienced grandmother herself. "But in the end, he was happy, because he discovered that our family never stopped loving him, even when we didn't know he loved us too. And now he's in heaven watching us together." "Yes, my dear, and he is very proud to see how our family has grown and stayed united." These conversations with the younger children became special moments of the family gatherings. It was through them that the story was perpetuated, that the values were passed on, that the memory of the grandfather remained alive and influential. The house's garden flourished beyond any expectation. The fruit trees planted during the inauguration now produced abundant fruit, which was shared with neighbors and visitors. The organic vegetable garden fed not only the family, but also several underprivileged families in the region. Ashley developed an educational program where children from local schools visited the garden to learn about sustainability, healthy eating, and environmental care. The program was named Grandpa Walter's Garden and became an educational reference in the region. Every plant that grows here, Ashley explained to the student groups, carries a little bit of the love my grandfather had for family and community. Derek's woodworking workshop also expanded, offering regular courses for young people interested in learning the craft. Many graduates started their own businesses, creating a small network of skilled professionals in the region. "What makes me proudest," Derek said during a local interview, "isn't the workshop's financial success. It's seeing that we are creating opportunities for young people who, otherwise, might not have had professional prospects." The house also became a reference point for researchers interested in family reconciliation cases. Students of psychology, social work, and law regularly visited the place to understand how a family had managed to overcome 15 years of separation and build even stronger relationships. Dr. Nathan, who remained a close friend of the family, wrote a book about the case, analyzing it from both a legal and psychological perspective. The book became a reference in university courses on elder rights and family conflict resolution. "The Mitchell family case," he wrote in the book's introduction, "proves that the truth has a unique transformative power. When it finally emerges, it not only corrects past injustices but creates future possibilities that seemed impossible." 15 years after the discovery of the truth, the family celebrated a special date, what would have been Grandpa Walter's 90th birthday. They decided to throw a big party at the house, inviting the entire community that had been touched by his story. Hundreds of people attended, former students from the educational program, beneficiaries of the scholarship fund, other families who had been inspired by the story to resolve their own conflicts, neighbors, friends, and local authorities. "Today we celebrate not only Grandpa Walter's life," said Connor during his speech at the party, "but also the power of family love to overcome any obstacle." During the party, several people gave testimonies about how the family's story had influenced their own lives. A young man who had benefited from the educational fund told how the scholarship had changed his trajectory. A family that had reconciled after years of fighting explained how the Mitchells' example had given them the courage to seek the truth about their own conflict. "Your story," said Mrs. Dorothy, a lady from the community, "taught us that it's never too late to fix what seems lost forever." The party ended with the planting of a special tree in the center of the garden, a yellow ipê, a tree symbolic of Brazil, which would bloom every year around Grandpa's birthday. The ceremony was led by the youngest children in the family, symbolizing the continuity of the story for future generations. That night, when all the guests had left and the family was gathered alone in the quiet house, Beverly made an observation that deeply touched everyone. "Today I felt Grandpa Walter's presence stronger than ever. It was as if he were here with us, seeing everything we built in his memory." "I felt it too," agreed Ashley, "especially when the children were playing in the garden. It was as if he was smiling, happy to see that we managed to turn his pain into joy for so many people." "The most important thing," added Raymond, "is that we didn't let the story die. Every person who passes through here takes a little piece of his example, and that multiplies infinitely." Connor, now 45 with 2 children of his own, reflected on the journey that had begun when he found that first key in the kitchen drawer. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't found that key, or if I hadn't had the courage to investigate. Our family would have remained separated forever, and Grandpa's memory would have been eternally wronged." "But you found it," said Rebecca, his wife, "and you had courage, and that changed not only our family but hundreds of other lives." "It wasn't just my courage," insisted Connor. "It was Grandpa's love that guided us. He planted the right clues, at the right times, for the right people. It was as if he knew that one day someone would come looking for the truth." The conversation stretched into the night, with each member of the family sharing their reflections on the years that had passed since the discovery. Everyone agreed that, despite the initial pain of learning about Grandpa's suffering, the truth had been liberating and transformative. "Grandpa taught us that true love sometimes requires sacrifices," said Derek. "He sacrificed his own happiness to protect ours. Now it's up to us to honor that sacrifice by doing something good with our lives." "And that's exactly what we're doing," replied Ashley. "Every social project, every person helped, every family reconciled because of our example is a way of honoring what he did for us." As the years passed, Grandpa's house became a true cultural heritage site for the city of Greenfield. The local city hall officially recognized it as cultural and social heritage due to its significance to the community. A commemorative plaque was installed at the entrance to the property with the following words: "Walter Mitchell House, symbol of family love, forgiveness, and social transformation. Here truth overcame lies, love overcame pride, and unity overcame separation." The official recognition brought even more visitors interested in learning the story. School field trips became common, with teachers using the site to teach values like perseverance, justice, and the importance of family. Connor, who had retired early to dedicate himself fully to the family's social projects, became the primary guardian of Grandpa's memory. He personally conducted many of the guided tours, telling the story with the passion of someone who had lived it intensely. "The most important lesson we learned," he always told visitors, "is that the truth can be hidden, it can take time to appear, but when it finally comes to light, it has the power to heal wounds that seemed incurable." His wife, Rebecca, complemented this by organizing workshops on resolving family conflicts. Her background in psychology qualified her to help other families find ways to overcome their differences. "Every family has its own key hidden in a drawer," she used to say. "Sometimes it takes courage to look for it and even more courage to use it." Connor and Rebecca's children grew up hearing the story of their great-grandfather, Walter, and developed a keen social conscience from an early age. Ethan, the eldest at 15, was already coordinating groups of young volunteers in the house's projects. Emily, at 12, had created a reading club for underprivileged children in the region. "It's incredible how values are perpetuated through generations," observed Dr. Nathan during one of his visits. "The children born after the discovery of the truth already naturally carry the spirit of solidarity that Grandpa Walter demonstrated in his life." 20 years after the whole story began, when Connor was already 50, he received an unexpected phone call. It was from a young lawyer from Chicago representing the children of Vernon Palmer. "Mr. Connor," said the lawyer, "my clients would like to speak with your family. Their father passed away recently and left a letter asking them to seek you out." Connor was surprised but agreed to receive Vernon's sons. The meeting took place on a Saturday afternoon, in the living room of Grandpa's house. Two middle-aged men, clearly embarrassed, introduced themselves as Dennis and Gerald Palmer. "Mr. Connor," began Dennis, the older one, "we came here to apologize on behalf of our father. We know this doesn't change anything he did, but we want you to know that in his final years, he deeply regretted his actions." Gerald handed a handwritten letter to Connor. "Our father wrote this shortly before he died. He specifically asked us to bring it to you." Connor opened the letter and read it aloud for the family present. "To the Mitchell family, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness after all the harm I caused, but I cannot leave this world without trying. During the years I spent in prison, I had time to reflect on my actions and understand the extent of the suffering I provoked. Walter Mitchell was a good, honest man who only wanted to protect his family. I took advantage of his vulnerability in a cruel and selfish way. I separated a family that loved each other, caused 15 years of unnecessary pain, deprived an old man of the company of his loved ones in his final years of life. I do not expect to be forgiven. I only hope you know that I recognize the gravity of what I did, and that I carry this weight until my last days. If there is any justice in the universe, Walter is at peace now, knowing that his family discovered the truth and reconciled. That is the only consolation I can have. May God bless and protect you always. Vernon Palmer." The room fell silent for a few minutes after the letter was read. Finally, it was Raymond who broke the silence. "Tell them we thank you for bringing this letter, and also tell them that our family has forgiven you, just as we forgave your father." Dennis and Gerald were visibly moved by the response. "How can you forgive after everything?" asked Gerald. "Because our grandfather taught us that forgiveness frees the one who forgives more than the one who is forgiven," answered Ashley. And because we discovered that holding a grudge only hurts us. Besides, added Derek, you are not to blame for your father's mistakes. Each person is responsible only for their own actions. Before leaving, Dennis and Gerald made a significant donation to the educational fund in memory of Grandpa Walter. It's little compared to the harm our father caused, said Dennis, but we want to contribute in some way to the good you are doing. After the departure of Vernon's sons, the family gathered to talk about the encounter. It was strange, but also comforting, said Connor. Knowing that in the end Vernon recognized his mistakes gives a sense of closure to the story. And it shows that it's never too late to repent, added Beverly. Even if it's too late to fix the harm done, it's never too late to acknowledge it. Vernon's letter was added to the family's historical archive, not as a trophy of victory, but as a reminder that even people who seem irredeemable can find redemption. At 85 years old, Mrs. Ethel, the neighbor who had cared for Grandpa Walter in his final days, still visited the house regularly. She had become a sort of honorary matriarch of the family, always present at important events. Mrs. Ethel, said Beverly at one of these gatherings, you were an angel in Grandpa Walter's life. Without you, he would have spent his last years completely alone. Nonsense, my dear. I only did what any decent neighbor would do. The angel was Walter, always helping others even while he was suffering. But you were special. It was through you that he kept up with our lives. It was you who found him when he left us. It was you who told us how he really was. Mrs. Ethel smiled modestly, but it was visible that she felt honored to have been part of that story. The 20th anniversary of Grandpa Walter's death was marked by a special celebration. The family organized a mass in his memory, followed by a community party at the house. Hundreds of people attended, many of whom had been directly or indirectly benefited by his legacy. During the party, a new project was inaugurated, a small support home for needy elderly, built on a plot of land adjacent to the original property. The house was named Walter Mitchell Home and offered temporary housing for elderly people in vulnerable situations. This project, Connor explained during the inauguration, represents everything our grandfather believed in, that no one should face old age alone, that everyone deserves dignity and care, that a strong community protects its most vulnerable members. The first resident of the Walter Mitchell home was an 80-year-old woman named Evelyn who had lost her home in a fire and had no family to support her. It's as if Grandpa Walter is taking care of me, she said emotionally as she settled into her new home. After so much misfortune, I've found a new family. Mrs. Evelyn's words perfectly captured the spirit of the project, to create an extended family for those without a natural family, to offer the love and care that Grandpa Walter himself had lost in his final years. As the years passed, the Mitchell family's story continued to inspire people far beyond the borders of Greenfield. Documentaries were produced in other countries, books were translated into several languages, and the house became a destination for international visitors interested in family reconciliation experiences. An American university invited Connor to give a lecture on family conflict resolution. In his presentation, he highlighted the elements that had been fundamental to the success of the reconciliation. First, never give up the search for the truth even when it seems unlikely. Second, have the courage to face painful discoveries. Third, choose forgiveness over resentment. And fourth, transform personal pain into positive social action. The lecture was recorded and became study material in family psychology courses worldwide. Connor received invitations to speak in other countries, but preferred to keep his activities focused in Brazil, especially in his region. My mission is here, he explained to Rebecca. This is where the story began, and this is where it should continue to flourish. The social projects linked to his grandfather's house multiplied over the years. In addition to the educational fund, the woodworking workshop, the educational garden, and the home for the elderly, new programs emerged. Literacy classes for adults, support groups for families in crisis, art therapy workshops for underprivileged children. Each new project was named to honor some aspect of the family history. The art workshop was called Dorothy's Atelier, in honor of his grandmother. The family support group was named the Walter Circle, referencing the way his grandfather had united the family even after his passing. Ashley, now an experienced grandmother at 60, developed a special program called the Garden of Memories, where elderly community members taught traditional cultivation techniques to children and youth. It was a way to preserve ancestral knowledge while creating intergenerational bonds. Grandpa always said that knowledge only has value when it's shared, Ashley explained to the program participants. Here you're not just learning how to plant, you're receiving the wisdom of an entire generation. Derek, who had become a regionally recognized carpenter, created a project called Memory Furniture, where he restored pieces with sentimental value for underprivileged families free of charge. The project was based on the principle that old objects carry stories and that preserving them is a way of keeping family memory alive. Every piece of furniture we restore carries a family's history, Derek explained to his apprentices. When we bring life back to these objects, we're also restoring a piece of family dignity. Raymond, now in his 80s, became the official storyteller of the family history. His exceptional memory and storytelling ability made him a true family griot, keeping alive the traditions and teachings passed down by his father. The story of our family, he would always say, doesn't end with us. Every child that is born carries the responsibility to continue the legacy of love and solidarity that Grandpa Walter started. Beverly, despite her advanced age, remained active as a counselor for families in crisis. Her personal experience of nearly losing her family union due to a misunderstanding qualified her as a mediator in similar conflicts. The secret, she used to tell the families she counseled, isn't in never fighting. It's in never giving up on finding a solution that preserves love above all else. 25 years after the discovery of the truth about Grandpa Walter, the family celebrated a special date, the centennial of his birth. The celebration lasted a whole week, with different activities each day. The highlight was the inauguration of the Walter Mitchell Memorial, a small building in the center of the garden where all of Grandpa's documents, photos, and personal objects were gathered. The memorial wasn't just a museum, but a space for reflection on family and social values. This memorial, said Connor during the inauguration ceremony, doesn't just celebrate the memory of our grandfather. It celebrates the victory of truth over lies, of love over hatred, of unity over division. During that week of celebrations, there was also the launch of a book containing all the letters Grandpa had written to the family during the 15 years of separation. The book, titled Letters from the Heart, became a regional bestseller, and all the proceeds were directed to the family's social projects. These letters, wrote Ashley in the book's preface, are proof that true love overcomes any barrier, any distance, any misunderstanding. They are also a guide for anyone facing family conflicts. During the week of celebrations, visitors from various American states and even some foreigners came to see the house and hear the story. Journalists, researchers, students, families in similar situations all found inspiration for their own lives in the Mitchells' experience. A particularly emotional moment was when a Japanese family, visiting the United States, sought out the Mitchell house. The family patriarch had severed ties with his children due to cultural differences, and the story of Grandpa Walter had inspired them to seek reconciliation. Grandpa Walter's story very beautiful, said Mr. Kenji in broken English. We also want family united again. Connor and Rebecca spent an entire afternoon talking with the Japanese family, sharing their experiences and offering advice on how to begin a reconciliation process. It was a clear example of how a local story had gained universal dimensions. Family love has no nationality, commented Rebecca after the Japanese visitors departed. Conflicts may have different cultural origins, but the solutions always come from the heart. That night, during the last day of the celebrations, the family gathered alone in the house for a moment of private reflection. 3 generations were present: Grandpa Walter's children, Raymond and Barbara, who had reconciled with the family; the grandchildren, Connor, Ashley, and Derek; the great-grandchildren, and even some children from the 4th generation. Grandpa Walter would be 100 years old today, said Ethan, Connor's son, now a young adult of 25. If he could see all this, what do you think he would say? I think he would say he is proud, answered Raymond, his eyes shining, proud to see that his sacrifice was not in vain, that his story became an inspiration for so many people. He would also tell us to keep going, added Ashley. So we never forget that the work of building a strong family and a supportive community never ends. And I think he would ask us not to turn him into a perfect figure, said Connor, smiling. Grandpa made mistakes, made questionable decisions. What makes him special isn't perfection, but the immense love he had for his family. Emily, Connor's daughter, now a psychology graduate working in family therapy, brought a professional perspective to the conversation. From a therapeutic standpoint, our great-grandfather's story is fascinating because it shows how trauma can be transformed into growth. The forced separation from his family could have caused permanent damage, but it turned into something that strengthened the bonds. That's true, agreed Derek. Today our family is more united than it ever was before the fight, because now we know the value of what we have. The conversation lasted into the early morning, with each person sharing their reflections on how Grandpa's story had influenced their own life. The younger children fell asleep in the adults' laps, but the older ones kept talking until dawn. You know what impresses me the most, said Rebecca, watching the sunrise through the living room window. It's that this story has no end. Every child born into the family carries these values forward. Every person who visits this place takes a little bit of this experience into their own life. Grandpa achieved the immortality every person should desire, observed Beverly, now over 90, but still sharp and engaged. Not physical immortality, but immortality through the good he did, and the example he left. 30 years after the discovery of the truth, Connor, now a grandfather to several children, decided to write his own memoirs about the entire experience. The book, titled The Key to Truth, would become a classic about family reconciliation in the United States. In the book, Connor reflected on the lessons learned throughout the journey. I learned that truth has its own time, but it always ends up emerging. I learned that family love can overcome any obstacle, any misunderstanding, any hurt. I learned that sometimes you have to lose something to understand its true value. But mainly, I learned that our responsibility goes beyond our own family. When we receive a gift as great as unconditional love, we must share it with the world. That's what my grandfather did in his lifetime, even in the most adverse circumstances, and that's what we try to do in his memory. The book included all of Grandpa's original letters, photographs of the house from its different periods, testimonies from people helped by the social projects, and reflections on how to turn painful experiences into positive actions. Grandpa Walter's house had become, 3 decades later, much more than a family home. It was an educational center, a community landmark, a symbol of hope for families in crisis, a model of how love can overcome any adversity. Students from various universities visited the site to conduct research on family dynamics, conflict resolution, and the social impact of community initiatives. Master's and doctoral theses were written based on the Mitchell family's experience. The educational program Grandpa Walter's Garden had expanded to several schools in the region, taking children to learn not just about farming and sustainability, but about fundamental human values. Derek's carpentry workshop had trained hundreds of young people over the years, many of whom became successful entrepreneurs in their own communities. The educational fund had benefited over 500 students, creating a network of skilled professionals who gave back to the community through volunteer work. The Walter Mitchell home had welcomed dozens of elderly people in need, offering not just housing, but dignity and a sense of belonging. Many of the residents became active participants in the home's projects, contributing with their skills and experiences. It's a virtuous cycle, explained Ashley, now the general coordinator of all social projects. People arrive here needing help and end up becoming helpers for others. The tradition of Sunday lunches continued to be strictly maintained, but had evolved to include not only the blood family, but also the extended family, formed by all those who had been touched by the story. Beneficiaries of the projects, volunteers, close friends, people who had found a second home in the house. This table, Raymond would often say, pointing to the expanded table that seated 30 people on Sundays, represents Grandpa Walter's true legacy, the ability to turn strangers into family. In his final interviews, before passing away at 92, Raymond summarized the meaning of the entire experience this way. "My father taught us that true love sometimes requires misunderstood sacrifices. He taught us that the truth always finds a way to emerge. He taught us that it's never too late to forgive and start over. But most importantly, he taught us that a strong family is one that supports each other, that preserves its values through the generations, and that uses its own experiences to help others who are going through similar difficulties." Raymond's funeral was one of the most attended events in Greenfield's history. Thousands of people came to pay their respects not only to him, but to the family legacy he had helped build. During the wake, held at his grandfather's house, people shared stories about how Raymond and his family had positively influenced their lives. "Mr. Raymond taught me that family isn't just blood," said one of the young people helped by the projects. "It's a choice, it's care, it's being present when someone needs you." After Raymond's passing, Connor definitively assumed the leadership of the family and the social projects. At 65, he had become a respected figure, not only in Greenfield, but throughout the region, known for his wisdom in family matters and his dedication to social projects. Rebecca, his wife, had over the years developed a specialization in family therapy focused on reconciliation. Her practice in the grandfather's house provided free services to needy families and had become a reference for complex cases of family conflicts. "Every family we manage to reunite," she would say, "is a small victory of love over pride, of understanding over prejudice." Connor and Rebecca's children followed paths that honored the family legacy. Ethan graduated in law with a specialization in the rights of the elderly, offering free legal services to senior citizens who were victims of scams or family abandonment. Emily continued in psychology, but focused her career on research about family dynamics and conflict prevention. "Growing up hearing the story of our great-great-grandfather gave us a very clear perspective on what really matters in life," explained Ethan during an interview. "Family, truth, solidarity, these are the values that guide all our decisions." Grandpa Walter's great-grandchildren, now adults, had spread across various professions, but all maintained close ties to the house and the social projects. Some became teachers, others doctors, some engineers, others artists, but all carried with them the social consciousness developed through living with the family history. 40 years after the discovery of the truth about Grandpa Walter, the house had become a cultural heritage site, officially recognized by the state government. A historical plaque was installed on the property, and the location became part of educational tourism itineraries about family and social responsibility. The memorial for Grandpa had expanded to include a documentation center on family reconciliation, maintaining records of hundreds of similar cases that had been resolved with inspiration from the Mitchell family's story. The Walter Mitchell Library had grown and become one of the most important in the region for literature on family, aging, and social responsibility. Researchers from various universities used its resources to develop studies on family dynamics. The educational garden had been replicated in several schools in the region, always under the name Memory Garden or Grandpa Walter's Garden, carrying forward the teachings about sustainability, healthy eating, and respect for traditions. "It's impressive how a personal story can have such a broad impact," commented a visiting researcher. "You've turned a family tragedy into a social movement." "It wasn't intentional," replied Connor. "We simply followed our hearts and did what we thought was right." The social impact was a natural consequence of acting with love and generosity. During the celebrations for the 40th anniversary of the discovery of the truth, a special project was launched, the creation of Walter Mitchell houses in other cities, replicating the model of the community center developed on the original property. The first house was inaugurated in Springfield, coordinated by Ashley and her children. The second emerged in Chicago, under the responsibility of Derek's descendants. Other cities expressed interest in developing similar projects. "The model can be replicated," explained Ashley during the project expansion launch, "but each house must respect the characteristics and needs of its specific community. It's not about copying, but about adapting the principles of family love and community solidarity." The new houses maintained the essential elements of the original project: spaces for family gatherings, educational programs, intergenerational activities, support for needy seniors, and an educational fund for underprivileged youth. 50 years after Grandpa Walter's death, the family celebrated a historic date. 3 generations gathered at the original house to remember half a century of transformations and growth. Connor, now an octogenarian patriarch, led the special ceremony where a new tree was planted in the garden, an oak, a symbol of longevity and resilience. "This tree," he said during the ceremony, "will grow slowly, but it will live for centuries." Just like Grandpa Walter's story, it started small, grew gradually, but put down roots so deep that it will influence generations not yet born. During this celebration, the creation of the Walter Mitchell Foundation was announced, a non-profit organization aimed at promoting family reconciliation and support for the elderly throughout Brazil. The foundation would rely on resources from donations received over the years and the participation of all the family's descendants. "The time has come to formalize what we've always done informally," explained Rebecca, now also in her 80s, "to create a structure that ensures the continuity of the projects even when our generation is no longer here." The foundation took responsibility for all social projects, ensuring their financial and administrative sustainability. It also created a family mediator training program, training people to help other families resolve their conflicts. Ethan, Connor's son, assumed the presidency of the foundation, bringing his legal experience to ensure all actions complied with legislation and that resources were used as efficiently as possible. Emily, her sister, took charge of the Foundation's psychological department, developing intervention methodologies for family conflicts based on her own family's experience. "Our story proves that any family conflict can be overcome when there is goodwill from both sides," explained Emily during the Foundation's launch. The Foundation's role is to facilitate this process, offering tools and support for families who want to reconcile but don't know where to start. The 4th generation of Grandpa Walter's descendants also became actively engaged in the Foundation. Some specialized in gerontology, others in family psychology, and others in social organization management. All maintained close ties to the original house and regularly participated in the Sunday lunches that continued to be the heart of family life. "It's interesting to observe how values perpetuate through generations," commented an anthropologist who had been studying the family for decades. "Each new generation finds its own ways to express the same fundamental principles of family love and social responsibility." 60 years after Grandpa Walter's death, when Connor had already passed away and Ethan had assumed family leadership, the Walter Mitchell Institute for Family Studies was inaugurated, a research institution affiliated with several Brazilian universities. The institute developed a specific line of research on late family reconciliation, studying cases where families managed to reunite after long periods of separation. The Mitchell family's experience served as a paradigmatic case for these studies. "This family's history," explained the institute's director during its inauguration, "offers valuable insights into family resilience, the intergenerational impact of conflicts, and the transformative potential of truth and forgiveness." The institute also developed a training program for professionals working with families in crisis: social workers, psychologists, lawyers, mediators. The program included not only theory, but also practical experience in the projects developed at Grandpa's house. The original house continued to be the heart of all activities. Even after decades of intensive use, it was kept in perfect condition through the work of several generations of the family and hundreds of volunteers who took turns in its maintenance. The garden, now under the care of the 5th generation of descendants, had become a model of sustainable agriculture. Agronomy students from various universities interned at the site, learning organic cultivation techniques developed over decades of experimentation. The woodworking shop, run by Derek's descendants, had transformed into a technical school recognized by the Ministry of Education. Young people from across the region came to learn not only woodworking techniques, but also values of work, responsibility, and solidarity. The Walter Mitchell home had expanded into an assisted living complex, serving over 100 elderly residents. The model developed there served as inspiration for public elderly care policies in several Brazilian cities. What began as a family initiative has turned into a national benchmark, observed a gerontologist during a visit to the complex. You have proven it's possible to offer quality care for the elderly without losing the human warmth that characterizes a family environment. 70 years after the discovery of the truth about Grandpa Walter, the sixth generation of his descendants organized a special celebration. Over 1,000 people attended the event, including representatives from municipal, state, and federal governments, as well as academics, journalists, and people from all over Brazil who had been influenced by the story. During the celebration, the creation of the National Museum of the American Family was announced, with the core centered on the history of the Mitchells, but also including other significant experiences of American families throughout history. The family is the fundamental unit of society, said the Secretary of Culture during the museum's announcement ceremony. And the history of the Mitchell family exemplifies the best values of the American family: resilience, solidarity, perseverance, and commitment to the common good. The museum would be established in an expanded area of the original property, but Grandpa Walter's house would be preserved exactly as it was, maintaining its function as a family residence and community center. Our commitment, said Victoria Mitchell, great-granddaughter of Grandpa Walter and general coordinator of the foundation, is to preserve the intimate and familial character of the place, even with official recognition. The house remains, first and foremost, our family home. The history of the Mitchell family had transcended its personal origins to become cultural heritage of the country. But at its core, it remained the simple story of a grandfather who loved his family unconditionally and of a family that knew how to honor that love through generations. At the Sunday lunches, which continued to happen religiously every week, the youngest children still heard stories about their great-great-grandfather Walter, learning about his values and his example. The tradition perpetuated itself, ensuring that his memory and teachings remained alive. The greatest tribute we can pay to Grandpa Walter, Victoria often said during these lunches, is not to turn him into a distant historical figure. It is to live every day by the values he taught us: unconditional love for family, solidarity with those in need, constant pursuit of truth, and the ability to forgive and start anew. And so, 80 years after his birth and 60 years after his death, Grandpa Walter Mitchell continued to be present in the lives of hundreds of people, influencing decisions, inspiring actions, uniting families, and building more supportive communities. His story had proven that true love knows no bounds of time or space, that truth always finds a way to emerge, that it is never too late to forgive and begin again, and that a family united by love can transform not only their own lives, but an entire community. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Connor made the right decision by seeking the truth? We'll be happy to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.